It was a flawless Saturday afternoon in early May, the kind that makes you grateful for the quiet joys of homeownership in the upscale Willow Grove neighborhood of Raleigh, North Carolina. The magnolias I'd planted 3 years ago were bursting with creamy blooms, and my lawn, a lush green masterpiece, was the pride of Maple Lane. After years of grinding as a senior financial analyst at Pinnacle Wealth Management, I'd finally bought my dream home at 512 Maple Lane stately colonial with a sprawling front yard and a porch that had stolen my heart the moment I saw it. My name is Marcus Reynolds, and that Saturday started like any other weekend since I'd moved in 2 years ago. I woke early, brewed my favorite dark roast in a French press, and spent the morning tackling emails before slipping into old jeans for some yard work. My late father used to say, "A man's home is his legacy." I lived by those words. Every weekend, I poured myself into maintaining my property, from pruning the hedges to mowing the lawn with precision. I was halfway through trimming the rose bushes along my fence when I noticed a commotion across the street. My neighbor, Patricia Wentworth, or Tricia, as she liked to be called, was orchestrating a flurry of activity. Event staff were unloading tables, chairs, and string lights from a fleet of white vans, transforming her front yard into what looked like a festival ground. I hadn't paid much attention to Tricia since she'd moved into the neighborhood 6 months earlier. Our interactions were limited to curt nods when we crossed paths at the mailbox. From snippets of gossip at the local coffee shop, I knew she was a recent divorcee in her early 60s, living in her daughter's house while her daughter worked abroad. Tricia had quickly earned a reputation for meddling, complaining about everything from leaf blowers to parking etiquette, and trying to revive a defunct homeowners association despite not owning the property she occupied. I was wiping sweat from my forehead with a bandana when I saw Tricia striding across the street toward my yard. Her ash-blonde hair was pinned in a perfect chignon, untouched by the breeze, and she wore a tailored linen blazer over a silk blouse, her gold bracelets jangling softly. "Excuse me," she called, her voice a blend of honey and condescension. "You're Michael, aren't you?" "Marcus," I corrected, standing up and tucking my gardening gloves into my pocket. "Marcus Reynolds. Can I help you, Ms. Wentworth?" She waved a hand as if my name were a trivial detail. "Yes, Marcus. I'm hosting my grandson's christening this afternoon, and we're a bit short on space." She gestured toward her yard, where at least 24 chairs were being arranged and a catering truck had just arrived. "I noticed," I said evenly, unsure where this was headed. Her eyes swept over my property with a calculating glint that set me on edge. "Your yard would be ideal for extra seating and a play area for the kids." "It's so," she paused, choosing her words carefully. "Expansive." The way she said expansive carried a subtle jab, though I couldn't pinpoint why. I'd heard that tone before, polite on the surface, but laced with assumptions. "I'm sorry," I said, keeping my tone professional. "That won't work. I just treated the lawn with chemicals, and it's not safe for kids to play on." It was a half-truth, but I needed a firm boundary. Tricia's smile tightened, her eyes narrowing slightly. "Oh, don't worry about that. Kids are tough, and it's only for a few hours. We'll be done by 9, 10 at the latest." I blinked, caught off guard by her insistence. "Ms. Wentworth, I'm not comfortable with a large group using my property, especially on short notice." "Short notice?" She laughed, as if I'd said something absurd. "We're neighbors, Michael. This is what communities do, help each other out." "It's Marcus," I said, my patience thinning. "And while I'm all for community, letting 20 strangers use my yard with 2 hours' notice isn't something I can do." "I'm sorry." Her smile faltered, revealing a flicker of irritation. "I'd think someone like you would value community support," she said, her voice taking on a patronizing edge. "Someone new to Willow Grove, trying to fit in. This could be a chance to meet the right people." There was the coded language I'd heard too many times in my career, from boardrooms to country clubs. "Someone like you." I took a deep breath, reminding myself I'd worked too hard to let this escalate. "Ms. Wentworth, my answer is no. Good luck with your event, but you'll need to find another solution." As I turned to walk back to my house, I heard her mutter under her breath, something that sounded like, "This is why they don't belong here." I froze, my back to her, and counted to 10 before continuing to my porch. Some fights weren't worth having, but that comment lingered like a splinter. Little did I know, this was just the opening salvo in what would become the most surreal day of my life. Inside, I changed into a crisp polo and khakis, preparing to meet my sister and her husband for dinner later. As I adjusted my collar in the hall mirror, movement outside caught my eye. To my disbelief, Trisha was back on my lawn, this time with two men in polo shirts. One carried a measuring tape, the other a clipboard, jotting notes as Trisha gestured animatedly. I flung open the front door and stepped onto the porch. "Ms. Wentworth," I called, my voice sharp. "What are you doing?" She turned with a look of mild surprise, as if I were the intruder. "Oh, Michael, perfect timing. This is Tom and Greg from the event company. They're just measuring for the setup." My answer was no, I said firmly, descending the steps. I didn't permit anyone to be on my property, let alone measure it. The men exchanged uneasy glances, the one with the clipboard stepping back. Trisha, unfazed, flashed a tight smile. "Don't be difficult. This is Ethan's christening. Surely you wouldn't ruin a child's special day over a patch of grass you have plenty of." I ignored her and addressed the men directly. "Gentlemen, there's been a misunderstanding. I haven't authorized any event here. Please leave immediately." The men nodded, clearly relieved, and began retreating to the street. Trisha's face reddened. "This is absurd," she hissed. "Do you know how much I've spent on this event? The catering alone was $6,000. "That's not my problem," I replied calmly. "Your planning issues aren't my responsibility." She stepped closer, her voice dropping to a venomous whisper. "Listen, boy, you don't understand how things work in Willow Grove. My family knows everyone, from the police chief to the city council. One call from me can make your life very difficult." The word boy hit like a slap. Anger surged, but I'd learned long ago to channel it. At 6'3", I straightened to my full height and looked down at her. "Ms. Wentworth, I'm going to pretend you didn't say that. For the last time, leave my property or I'll call the police for trespassing." For a moment, I thought she'd back down. Her eyes widened, as if recalculating. But then her expression hardened. "Go ahead," she spat. "My cousin is Lieutenant Harper at the precinct. We'll see who they believe a respected community member, or—" Her gaze raked over me dismissively. "You." With that, she stormed back across the street, her posture rigid. I watched her go, a knot tightening in my chest. I'd met people like Trisha before, those who saw their privilege as a club to swing. Usually, I let it slide, another microaggression in a long list. But this was my home, the culmination of years of sacrifice. I wasn't about to let her disrespect that. I went inside and texted my sister, Lena, to warn her I might be late for dinner. Lena, ever the protective sibling despite being only 3 years older, called immediately. "Want me to come over?" she asked after I recounted the incident. "This woman sounds like trouble." "No, I've got it," I said. "She's probably just bluffing, used to getting her way." "If you're sure," Lena said, skeptical. "But call if anything escalates." I promised I would and settled into my armchair with a book, hoping to calm my nerves. But at 3:30 p.m., voices outside jolted me back to reality. Peering through the blinds, I saw Trisha on my lawn again, this time with 6 or 7 people, carrying chairs and tables. One man was hammering stakes into my grass. Fury propelled me outside. "What is going on?" I demanded, my voice carrying across the yard. Everyone froze, turning to me. Trisha stepped forward, a smug smile on her lips. "Oh, Michael," she said sweetly, using the wrong name again. I was about to knock. "I've reconsidered our little disagreement. We got off on the wrong foot." She gestured to a man holding an envelope. $100 for the inconvenience, and you're welcome to join the party." The audacity was staggering. She was trying to buy my property for $100, framing it as a favor. "Ms. Wentworth," I said, my voice low, "remove these people from my property. I won't be bribed with $100 or any amount." Her smile wavered. "There's no need for that tone. I told everyone you agreed to share your yard." "You lied," I said flatly. "I never agreed, and I'm telling you to leave. All of you," I added, addressing the staff, who looked increasingly uncomfortable. "You can't be serious," Trisha scoffed. "The guests are arriving soon." "Not my problem," I said. "This is private property. You're trespassing." "Trespassing?" she echoed, incredulous. "This is a community event. Everyone else has been cooperative. Why are you so difficult?" I noticed the staff shifting, some backing away. A young woman with a braid set down her chair and slipped toward the vans. "Ms. Wentworth," I said, struggling to stay calm. "I don't care if every neighbor offered their yard. I didn't. This is my property, and I decide who uses it. Leave. Her face twisted with rage. You ungrateful. She stopped herself, then pulled out her phone. Fine. Let's see what the police say. She dialed 911, her eyes locked on mine. Yes, hello, she said, her voice suddenly quivering with fake distress. I need help at 512 Maple Lane. The TA man is threatening me and my family. He's getting aggressive, and I'm scared for my safety. He's a tall black man, blocking us from a space we paid to use. My stomach churned. She was painting me as a threat on my property. Calmly, I pulled out my phone and started recording. Trisha noticed. Now he's filming me without consent, she shrieked into the phone. Please hurry. For the record, I said, addressing her and the staff. I'm Marcus Reynolds, the owner of 512 Maple Lane. I've asked Ms. Wentworth and her associates to leave my property, which they entered without permission. I haven't threatened anyone. The staff began dispersing, many of them people of color who seemed to recognize Trisha's tactics. Only 2 older men stayed, looking unsure. Trisha hung up, triumphant. The police are coming, she declared. They'll sort this out. Yes, they will, I said, still recording. Would you like to clear your equipment before they arrive? She scoffed. Don't be ridiculous. This is a misunderstanding that could have been avoided if you'd been reasonable. A misunderstanding? I repeated, my voice sharp. You asked to use my yard, I said no. You came back with workers. I said no again. You offered money, and I refused. You called the police, claiming I'm a threat. Where's the misunderstanding? You're twisting everything, she snapped. I was trying to include you in our community. The implication was clear. I should be grateful for her condescension. Before I could respond, sirens sounded, and a police cruiser pulled up. 2 officers stepped out, an older white man with a buzz cut and a younger black woman. I felt a flicker of relief at her presence. Trisha rushed toward the male officer, her demeanor shifting to victimhood. Thank goodness you're here, she gushed. This has been terrifying. I stayed put, phone still recording, as the officers approached. The 2 officers approached me, their expressions neutral but attentive. The older white officer, with a salt and pepper buzz cut, spoke first. Sir, I'm Officer Bennett, and this is Officer Carter. We got a call about a disturbance at this address. Can you tell us what's going on? I lowered my phone slightly but kept recording, ensuring every word was captured. Officer Bennett, I'm Marcus Reynolds, the homeowner at 512 Maple Lane. Earlier today, Ms. Wentworth asked to use my front yard for an event she's hosting. I declined. She returned with workers to set up anyway. I asked them to leave multiple times, and when they refused, Ms. Wentworth called you, falsely claiming I was threatening her. Officer Carter, the younger black woman, was already jotting notes in a small pad. Her eyes flicked to my phone, and she gave a subtle nod, as if approving my decision to record. Officer Bennett glanced between me and Trisha, who was hovering nearby, her arms crossed, and her face a mask of indignation. That's nonsense, Trisha interjected, her voice shrill. We had an agreement. I even offered to pay him, and he turned hostile. There was no agreement, I said firmly. I recorded the entire interaction, including her admission that she was setting up without permission and her attempt to offer me money after I refused. Officer Bennett raised an eyebrow. Ma'am, do you have any documentation of this agreement? Trisha faltered, her confidence wavering. Well, no, it was verbal. Between neighbors. That's how things work in Willow Grove. Ask anyone. She gestured vaguely toward the surrounding houses, but no neighbors had emerged to back her up. Mr. Reynolds, Officer Carter said, her tone direct. Can we see the recording? I nodded and handed her my phone. The video played clearly. Trisha's insistence, her offer of $100, her 911 call, where she emphasized my race and fabricated threats. Officer Carter's expression remained professional, but I caught a flicker of recognition in her eyes. I'd seen this playbook before. Officer Bennett's face was harder to read, but he seemed to reassess the situation as the footage unfolded. When the video ended, Officer Bennett turned to Trisha. Ma'am, based on this, there's no evidence of an agreement. If Mr. Reynolds says you don't have permission to be here, you need to leave. Trisha's face flushed crimson. This is outrageous. Do you know who I am? My cousin is Lieutenant Harper. Her voice rose, drawing the attention of a few event staff still lingering across the street. Officer Bennett's expression hardened. Ma'am, It doesn't matter who you know. The law applies to everyone. You and your staff need to vacate Mr. Reynolds' property now. I want to speak to your supervisor. Tricia demanded, her composure crumbling. I've lived in this neighborhood for years. I've never been treated like this. You can file a complaint through proper channels, Officer Carter said smoothly. But right now, you're trespassing. If you don't leave, we'll have to take further action. Tricia stood frozen, as if stunned that her tactics weren't working. The remaining staff, two older men who'd hesitated earlier, exchanged glances and began gathering their equipment. This isn't over, Tricia hissed at me, her voice low enough that the officers likely didn't hear. You have no idea who you're dealing with. I said nothing, knowing any response would only fuel her. The officers stayed until Tricia and her crew had retreated across the street, with Officer Carter pulling me aside as her partner oversaw the removal of the last chairs. Mr. Reynolds, she said quietly, keep that recording safe. If anything else happens, call us directly. Ask for me or Officer Bennett. She handed me a card with her contact information. Thank you, I said, genuinely grateful for their fairness. Officer Bennett paused as they turned to leave. One more thing, Mr. Reynolds. You might want to consider security cameras if you don't have them. Just a precaution. His words left a chill in the air. I nodded, watching as they returned to their cruiser and drove off. Across the street, Tricia was on her phone, gesticulating wildly and shooting venomous glances my way. I checked my watch 4:15 p.m. I was now running late for dinner with Lena and her husband, Jamal. I texted Lena a quick update and headed inside to grab my keys. But Tricia's parting threat echoed in my mind. This wasn't over. I returned from dinner around 9:30 p.m. The meal had been pleasant, but Tricia's behavior cast a shadow over the evening. Lena and Jamal had been furious on my behalf, with Jamal offering to spend the night at my place. I declined, insisting I could handle it. As I pulled into my driveway, I saw Tricia's party in full swing. Cars lined the street, and laughter mingled with soft music under glowing string lights. About 30 guests mingled on her lawn, their silhouettes elegant against the warm glow. I sighed with relief, found a way to manage without my yard. Maybe the police visit had put an end to her schemes. I grabbed my jacket and headed up the walkway, eager for a quiet night with a glass of bourbon and my book. But as I unlocked my front door, a crash shattered the calm. I turned to see a group of kids, no older than 10, running across my lawn, chasing a soccer ball. One had knocked over a ceramic lantern by my garden path, its glass pane now in shards. Before I could react, a man's voice called from across the street. Kids, get back here. You're not supposed to be over there. The children froze, then scurried back to Tricia's yard, looking guilty. A man in his 40s, with thinning hair and a navy blazer, approached my property line. Sorry about that, he said, his tone more dismissive than apologetic. Kids, you know, can't watch him every second. I nodded stiffly, crouching to pick up the larger glass pieces. No problem. Accidents happen. He lingered, as if about to say more, then turned and rejoined the party. I cleaned up what I could in the fading light, resolving to check for stray shards in the morning. As I stood, I caught Tricia watching me from her porch, a champagne flute in her hand. She raised it slightly in my direction, her expression unreadable. I ignored her and went inside, locking the door. The incident felt off, especially with Tricia's watchful gaze. Was it an accident? I changed into sweats, poured a glass of Maker's Mark, and settled onto the couch with my book. I'd barely read a page when the music from Tricia's party surged, the bass rattling my windows. I glanced at my watch 10:05 p.m. Not unreasonably late for a Saturday, but pushing neighborly courtesy. I tried to focus, but after 20 minutes of the same loud playlist, I set my book aside, debating whether to confront her or call the police. Before I could decide, my doorbell rang. I approached cautiously, peering through the peephole. To my surprise, Officer Carter stood on my porch. I opened the door. Officer Carter, is everything okay? She offered a weary smile. Mr. Reynolds, sorry to bother you. We got multiple noise complaints about the party across the street. Given your earlier issue, I wanted to check in. I appreciate that, I said. The music's loud, but I was trying not to escalate things. That's commendable, she said. But you shouldn't have to endure a disturbance to keep the peace. We're heading over there to ask them to turn it down. Any other issues? I hesitated. Some kids from the party broke a lantern on my property earlier. It seemed innocent, but after today, I'm not sure. Officer Carter nodded, finishing my thought. You're wondering if it's connected. Want to file a report for the damage? No, it's just a small piece, I said. Not worth it. She studied me, then glanced at her notepad. We'll handle the noise. If anything else happens, call me or Bennett. We're on until 2 a.m. I thanked her and watched as she and Officer Bennett crossed the street. From my doorway, I saw Tricia greet them, her demeanor warm until she realized why they were there. Her face soured, and she shot a glare my way. I closed the door, not wanting to seem smug. Within minutes, the music quieted, and I returned to my book, though my focus was shot. I kept bracing for the next disruption. Around midnight, the party began to wind down. Cars pulled away, and the voices across the street faded. I was about to head to bed when a sharp thud hit my front door, not a knock, but something thrown. I crept to the peephole, but saw nothing. Opening the door, I found a shattered champagne glass on my welcome mat, its contents soaking the fibers. No one was in sight, but Tricia's involvement was obvious. I cleaned up the mess, my frustration mounting. This was petty, juvenile behavior from someone who claimed to be a pillar of the community. As I debated calling the police, headlights swept across my window. A car parked directly in front of my house, not a partygoer leaving, but someone arriving. A man in his 60s, in a tailored suit despite the hour, stepped out and marched to my door. His gait was unsteady, suggesting he'd been drinking. The doorbell rang, and I answered, exasperation overtaking caution. Can I help you? I asked, my tone sharp. He drew himself up, though he was shorter than I. Are you the one who called the cops on my sister's party? So this was Tricia's brother, the one with the supposed police connections. I didn't call about the noise, I said truthfully. Other neighbors did. I did call earlier when your sister trespassed on my property after I told her no. His face reddened. Trespassed? This is Willow Grove. We don't trespass, we help each other. Tricia told me how you refused her and then sicked the cops on her. Being neighbors doesn't give her the right to use my property, I said. It's late. Please leave. He stepped closer, his breath reeking of whiskey. You people are all the same. Move into nice neighborhoods and refuse to fit in. Anger flared, but I kept my voice steady. Sir, you're trespassing and making racist remarks. Leave now, or I'll call the police. Call them, he sneered. My cousin is Lieutenant Harper. You think they'll side with some newcomer over us? I'd had enough. I pulled out my phone and began recording. You're trespassing and threatening me while intoxicated. I'm recording for my safety. Leave. The mention of recording seemed to register. He stumbled back. You can't record me. This is my property, I said. I can record anything here. Leave. He swayed, pointing a finger. This isn't over. You've made a big mistake moving here. He staggered to his car, fumbling with his keys. Sir, I called, my civic duty overriding my anger. You shouldn't drive right now. Let me call you a ride. Mind your own business, he snapped, yanking open his door. I dialed 911, reporting an intoxicated driver. Within minutes, Officers Bennett and Carter pulled up, just as Tricia's brother backed into the curb twice. They approached his car, and after a brief exchange, had him perform a sobriety test, which he failed miserably. As they cuffed him, Tricia rushed across the street, her face livid. What's going on? Why are you arresting my brother? Officer Bennett explained the DUI charge while Officer Carter completed the arrest. Tricia's gaze locked on me. You, she shrieked, starting toward my property. This is your fault. Officer Carter intercepted her. Ma'am, step back. Your brother was driving drunk. That's on him. He wouldn't have been drinking if this man hadn't harassed us all day. Tricia jabbed a finger at me. I stayed silent, letting the officers handle it. Ma'am, Officer Bennett said firmly, we've responded to multiple calls here today, and Mr. Reynolds has been within his rights each time. Your brother's going to the station. You can follow if you want. Tricia looked ready to argue, but Officer Bennett's tone stopped her. With a final glare, she stormed back to her house. Officer Carter approached me. You okay, Mr. Reynolds? Yes, thank you, I said. Sorry for taking up your night. It's our job, she said with a small smile. You've handled this with patience. Not everyone would. As they drove off with Tricia's brother, exhaustion hit me. It was nearly 1 a.m., and all I wanted was sleep. But Tricia wasn't done yet. I had just changed into pajamas and was brushing my teeth when a commotion outside snapped me back to alertness. Peering through my bathroom window, which overlooked the front yard, I saw Trisha Wentworth marching up my walkway, flanked by two men I didn't recognize. One was filming with his phone, while the other held a hand-painted sign. My heart sank. This woman was relentless. "You've got to be kidding," I muttered, rinsing my mouth and throwing on a robe. By the time I reached the front door, the doorbell was ringing incessantly, the button held down in a childish tantrum. I opened the door to find Trisha, her makeup smudged and her once-perfect chignon wilting. Behind her, the man with the phone kept recording, while the other held his sign aloft. "Justice for Wentworth," scrawled in red paint. "This is harassment," Trisha declared, her voice loud and performative for the camera. "My brother's been wrongfully arrested because of this man's lies." I stared, incredulous. "Ms. Wentworth, your brother was arrested for driving drunk. That's not on me. He wouldn't have been drinking if you hadn't caused so much stress with your unreasonable behavior today." Her voice rose to a shrill pitch. "You've disrupted a sacred family event and gotten an innocent man locked up." Lights flicked on in neighboring houses, curious faces appearing at windows to witness the late-night drama. "It's after 1 a.m., I said, keeping my tone measured. "You and your friends need to leave my property. This is your only warning before I call the police again." The man with the camera stepped closer. "The public deserves to know about people like you moving into respectable neighborhoods and causing trouble." I turned to him. "And you are?" "Leonard Hayes, editor of the Willow Grove Gazette," he replied with exaggerated importance, as if his neighborhood newsletter were the New York Times. I suppressed a laugh at the absurdity. "Mr. Hayes, I don't consent to being filmed on my property. You and Ms. Wentworth are trespassing." "Freedom of the press," he shot back, still recording. I'd had enough. I pulled out my phone and dialed the non-emergency number Officer Carter had given me. To my relief, she answered. "Officer Carter, this is Marcus Reynolds at 512 Maple Lane. I'm sorry to call again, but Ms. Wentworth is back on my property with two men, one filming me without consent. They won't leave." I could hear Trisha's protests in the background, her voice growing more strident as she realized I was on the phone. "We'll be there in 5 minutes, Mr. Reynolds," Officer Carter said. "Avoid engaging until we arrive." I ended the call and addressed the trio. "The police are coming. I suggest you leave to avoid further trouble." Trisha stepped closer, her finger jabbing at my chest. "You think you're so clever, using the system against honest citizens who built this community." I stepped back to avoid her touch. "Ms. Wentworth, I'm exercising my rights as a homeowner, the same rights you'd demand if someone showed up at your door at 1 a.m. "It's not the same," she insisted. "We were trying to welcome you to the neighborhood." I couldn't help but scoff. "By calling the police on me? Sending your drunk brother to threaten me? Showing up with a camera crew at midnight? That's your welcome wagon?" Her face flushed. "You're twisting everything. Leonard, keep filming." Just then, a new voice cut through the night. "What's going on here?" We turned to see an older black woman in a polka-dot bathrobe approaching from next door. This was Mrs. Clara Thompson, my neighbor, who'd greeted me with a pecan pie when I moved in. In her 70s, a retired librarian, she'd lived in Willow Grove for decades, back when it was less exclusive. "Mrs. Thompson," I said, relieved. "I'm sorry for the noise." She waved off my apology, her eyes fixed on Trisha. "Patricia Wentworth, what are you doing on this man's porch at this hour? Have you lost your senses?" Trisha faltered, caught off guard by Clara's directness. "Clara, you don't understand. This man's been causing trouble all day. He refused to let us use his yard for Ethan's christening, then called the police on my brother." Clara crossed her arms. "And why should Marcus let you use his property? Because that's what neighbors do? Did you bring him a casserole when he moved in? Offer to help? Because I remember you griping at the community picnic about newcomers changing Willow Grove when he bought this house." Trisha's mouth opened and closed, speechless. Leonard lowered his camera slightly, sensing the narrative slipping. "That's what I thought," Clara continued, stepping onto my porch beside me. "Now take your little film crew and get off Marcus's property before the police show up again." Right on cue, the police cruiser pulled up and Officers Bennett and Carter stepped out. Trisha's companions began backing away, Leonard pocketing his phone and the sign holder lowering his makeshift placard. "Mrs. Wentworth," Officer Bennett said, approaching, "we've already discussed respecting property lines today." Trisha struggled to compose herself. "Officer, I was trying to resolve this amicably." At 1:30 a.m. with a camera and a protest sign? Officer Carter asked, her tone skeptical. Leonard piped up. We're documenting a community dispute for the Gazette. It's protected activity. Officer Bennett fixed him with a stern look. Not on private property at this hour. I'll need ID from all three of you. As the officers collected identification and began issuing citations for disturbing the peace and trespassing, Clara turned to me with a sympathetic smile. I'm sorry you're dealing with this, Marcus. Trisha's always been a bit much, but her divorce last year and her daughter moving overseas seemed to have pushed her over the edge. I hadn't known about the divorce. I didn't realize she was divorced, I admitted, feeling a brief pang of empathy despite everything. Clara nodded. Her husband, George, passed away from a heart attack about a year ago. It was sudden, hit her hard. But that explains her behavior, it doesn't excuse it. I agreed, watching as the officers finished writing citations and ordered Trisha and her companions to leave. Trisha shot me one last glare before stalking back across the street, her posture stiff with humiliation. Officer Carter approached us. Mr. Reynolds, Mrs. Thompson, she said, nodding to Clara with familiarity. We've issued citations for trespassing and disturbing the peace. If they come back tonight, they'll be arrested. Thank you, I said. I appreciate your patience. It's unusual to get so many calls from one address in a shift, Carter said. But given the circumstances, I understand. Try to get some rest. Clara patted my arm. Don't worry about Trisha. She'll burn herself out eventually, and you've got friends in this neighborhood, whether she likes it or not. She bid me good night and headed home. I locked my door, checking the time. Nearly 2 a.m. exhaustion weighed on me, but I couldn't shake the feeling that Trisha had one more card to play. I woke on Sunday morning to my doorbell ringing insistently. Groggy, I checked my phone 8:05 a.m., far too early after the night I'd had. I pulled on my robe, half expecting Trisha with a new grievance. Instead, I found Officer Carter, now in plain clothes, and a man in a suit I didn't recognize. Mr. Reynolds, sorry to disturb you, Carter said. This is Detective Larson. Can we come in? Confused, I stepped aside. Of course. Is everything okay? Detective Larson's expression was grim as he scanned my living room. Mr. Reynolds, we've received a serious complaint from Patricia Wentworth. She claims you vandalized her property early this morning, spray painting derogatory messages on her garage. I stared dumbfounded. That's absurd. I've been asleep since you left last night. I haven't left the house. Carter nodded, as if expecting this. We figured as much, but we have to follow up. The messages referenced yesterday's events, so you're the primary suspect. Can you verify your whereabouts between 2:30 and 5 a.m.? Larson asked, his tone professional. I live alone, so no witnesses, I said. But I have a security system that would have recorded me leaving. Both officers perked up. You have cameras? Larson asked. Yes, I said. Installed when I bought the house. They cover all entry points, motion activated. Carter exchanged a glance with Larson. That could help, Mr. Reynolds. Can you check the footage? I led them to my home office and pulled up the security system. The interface showed the last motion at each entry point. The front door logged activity until 2:07 a.m., when Clara and the police left. Nothing until 8:12 a.m., when Carter and Larson arrived. As you can see, I said, no one entered or exited during that time. I was asleep. Larson studied the footage. Can we get a copy? It'll help clear you. Of course, I said, exporting the files. But what happened at Ms. Wentworth's? Carter sighed. Someone spray-painted entitled Trisha Lives Here across her garage, along with phrases about privilege. Given yesterday, she pointed the finger at you. I shook my head. I'd never do that. Vandalism isn't how I handle things. We believe you, Carter said, especially with this footage. But there's something else. She showed me a video on her phone, timestamped 3:17 a.m. from across the street. In grainy night vision, a hooded figure with a spray can approach my property, painted something on my walkway, and fled. This is from Ms. Wentworth's camera, Larson explained. She submitted it, claiming it showed you returning after vandalizing her place. But it shows someone approaching your house, not leaving. A chill ran through me. Are you saying my property was vandalized too? Carter nodded. There's a message on your walkway. We saw it when we arrived, but wanted to talk first. I moved to the front window and looked down. In bold red letters, The word outsider was scrawled across my pristine concrete. My fists clenched. After yesterday's trespassing, false accusations, and midnight harassment, this felt like a deliberate attack, laced with racial undertones. I need to see her garage, I said, my voice tight. If I'm being accused, I want to see what I supposedly did. Larson hesitated. Mr. Reynolds, I'm not sure. Please, I interrupted. I have the right to know. They exchanged glances and agreed. We crossed the street to Tricia's house, where neighbors had gathered, gawking at the graffiti on her white garage door. When Tricia saw me with the officers, she exploded. There he is. Arrest him. I have proof. Larson raised a hand. Ms. Wentworth, we've reviewed Mr. Reynolds' footage. He didn't leave his house after 2 a.m. He must have tampered with it, she insisted. My video shows him coming back. No, ma'am, Carter corrected. Your video shows someone vandalizing his walkway. We believe both properties were hit by the same person, not either of you. Tricia's gaze flicked to my walkway, where outsider stood out starkly. For a moment, something like guilt crossed her face, but it hardened quickly. Well, whoever did this was provoked by his behavior yesterday, she said, less confidently. I ignored her, focusing on her garage. Entitled Tricia Lives Here was sprayed in large letters, alongside Check Your Privilege and Spoiled Much. While I didn't condone vandalism, part of me understood the sentiment after Tricia's actions. Any idea who did this? Larson asked us both. I shook my head. I've only been here 2 years. My only close neighbor is Mrs. Thompson, and she's not exactly spray painting at 3 a.m. Tricia sniffed. It was one of his friends. They planned this. Carter's eyes narrowed. Ms. Wentworth, baseless accusations started this mess. Just then, a young woman with pink hair under a baseball cap approached. Officers, I might have information. The young woman with pink hair under a baseball cap stepped forward, her expression a mix of nervousness and resolve. The crowd of neighbors, still gawking at the graffiti on Tricia Wentworth's garage, turned their attention to her. Tricia's eyes narrowed, her lips pursing as if she sensed trouble. Who are you? She demanded, her voice sharp. I'm Lily Harper, the woman replied, unfazed. I was working the catering crew at your event yesterday. The name hit me like a jolt. Harper? I asked, recalling Tricia's repeated boasts about her cousin, Lieutenant Harper. Any relation to Lieutenant Harper at the precinct? Lily smiled, a hint of mischief in her eyes. He's my uncle. And, contrary to what Ms. Wentworth's been saying, he's not her cousin. He's a distant family friend barely knows her. They met once at a charity golf event years ago. Tricia's face drained of color, her confident facade crumbling. The neighbors exchanged glances, their murmurs growing as they processed this bombshell. Tricia had built her authority in Willow Grove on claims of connections, and now those claims were unraveling. That's not true, Tricia stammered. My family and the Harpers are close. You don't have any close relatives in Raleigh, Lily said calmly. My uncle checked when he got a call about last night's incidents. You've got a brother in Charlotte and another in Dallas. No cousins here. Detective Larson looked intrigued. Ms. Harper, you said you had information about the vandalism? Lily nodded, pulling out her phone. I was at a friend's place down the street last night after the event. Around 3 a.m., we were on her porch and saw someone suspicious walking the block with a bag that looked like it held spray paint cans. I recorded it. She handed her phone to Detective Larson, who watched the footage with Officer Carter peering over his shoulder. After a moment, Larson looked up, his expression serious. Ms. Wentworth, do you recognize this individual? He turned the screen toward her. Tricia's eyes widened, her composure faltering. I don't know who that is, she said, her voice unconvincing. Lily raised an eyebrow. That's Ethan Caldwell, Ms. Wentworth. He was a server at your event. I overheard you telling him how unfairly you'd been treated by your neighbor, saying someone should show him how things work in Willow Grove. The crowd gasped, and all eyes turned to Tricia. She seemed to shrink under the scrutiny, her hands trembling. I never said that, she protested. And if I did, I didn't mean for him to vandalize anything. Officer Carter's expression hardened. Ms. Wentworth, encouraging someone to commit a crime, even indirectly, could be considered solicitation. This is serious. Tricia's demeanor shifted from defiant to panicked. This is a misunderstanding. I was upset yesterday, yes, but I'd never tell anyone to break the law. Ethan must have misheard me. We'll need to speak with Mr. Caldwell, Detective Larson said. Do you have his contact information? Tricia reluctantly handed over her phone, her hands shaking as she unlocked it and pointed to Ethan's number. The officers noted the details, and I stood there, processing the rapid turn of events. The woman who'd made my life hell for the past 24 hours, who'd weaponized her perceived status against me, was finally facing consequences. Mr. Reynolds, Officer Carter said, turning to me, we'll need a formal statement from you about the vandalism to your property. You may also want to consider a restraining order against Ms. Wentworth, given the pattern of harassment. I nodded, still reeling. What happens now? We'll locate Mr. Caldwell and question him, Larson explained. If his account matches Ms. Harper's, Ms. Wentworth could face charges for solicitation of property damage, filing a false police report, and possibly inducing panic. Tricia let out a strangled sound. This is absurd. I've done nothing wrong. Mrs. Clara Thompson, who joined the crowd, stepped forward, her expression stern. Patricia, I've lived next to you for 12 years, and I've heard enough comments to know better. Don't act like you're innocent now. Other neighbors nodded, some avoiding Tricia's desperate gaze. Her carefully crafted image as Willow Grove's social arbiter was collapsing, revealing the pettiness beneath. I stepped back, observing the scene with a mix of vindication and fatigue. This wasn't the weekend I'd planned, but there was a certain justice in seeing the truth come to light. Lily Harper approached me, her expression apologetic. Mr. Reynolds, I'm so sorry about yesterday. Most of us on the crew were appalled by how she treated you, but we needed the work. I understand, I said. Thank you for coming forward with the video. She nodded. My uncle always taught me to do what's right, even when it's hard. When I saw the graffiti and heard Ms. Wentworth blaming you, I had to speak up. As we talked, I noticed Tricia being escorted to a police car in handcuffs, but clearly for further questioning. Her face was a mask of humiliation and rage as she shot me one last venomous glance before sliding into the back seat. The neighborhood would never see her the same way, and in a strange way, neither would it not because my view of her had changed, but because this ordeal had reminded me of a truth I sometimes let slip. Standing firm in my rights and dignity was always worth it, no matter who tried to intimidate me. The officers continued gathering statements from neighbors, and I found myself reflecting on how quickly this had escalated. Just yesterday, I'd been trimming my roses, savoring the quiet pride of my home. Now I was at the center of a neighborhood scandal, with graffiti on my walkway and a potential court case looming. But I also felt a growing sense of support from Clara, from Lily, from the officers who'd handled this with professionalism. As the crowd began to disperse, Clara pulled me aside. You did good, Marcus, she said. Not everyone would have stayed so calm through all this. You've got more patience than I would have. I smiled, grateful for her support. It wasn't easy, but I didn't want to give her the satisfaction of seeing me lose it. She chuckled. Smart man. Now, you get some rest. And if Tricia tries anything else, you've got half the street ready to back you up. Her words lifted some of the weight from my shoulders. I thanked her and headed back to my house, the red outsider, on my walkway a stark reminder of the battle I'd just fought. I resolved to have it cleaned professionally, but for now, I needed coffee and a moment to breathe. The next few days were a whirlwind. The police located Ethan Caldwell, who confessed almost immediately when shown Lily's video. He admitted Tricia had egged him on, venting about how I'd disrespected her and needed to be put in my place. His exact words, according to the police report, were that Tricia had said, "A little paint might teach him Willow Grove's rules." Ethan, a young man with no prior record, had acted impulsively, thinking he was earning favor with a powerful client. He spray-painted both properties Tricia's to make it look like a random act, and mine to send a message. The district attorney moved quickly. Tricia faced charges for solicitation of property damage, filing a false police report, and inducing panic. Ethan, in exchange for his testimony, was offered community service and probation, a lenient deal given his cooperation. I met with a lawyer, Sarah Nguyen, to prepare for a restraining order hearing against Tricia, scheduled for mid-May. The vandalism on my walkway was removed by a professional crew, leaving no trace of the hateful word, but the emotional mark lingered. As the hearing approached, I found myself reflecting on how much had changed. I'd always kept a low profile in Willow Grove, focusing on my career and my home. Now, I was a catalyst for something bigger, a reckoning with the neighborhood's unspoken rules and biases. Neighbors I'd barely spoken to before stopped by to check on me, some apologizing for not intervening sooner. The Willow Grove Gazette, under Leonard Hayes, published a tepid editorial about community misunderstandings, conveniently omitting his role in Trisha's midnight stunt. But the tide had turned. Trisha's influence was gone, her reputation in tatters. The morning of the hearing, I dressed carefully in a navy suit my mother had always said complimented my deep brown skin. "Wear it like you own the room," she'd told me before my first big job interview after grad school. A retired nurse who'd raised me and Lena alone after our father's passing, she'd taught me how to navigate spaces where I wasn't always welcome. Her words echoed as I drove to the Wake County Courthouse, a brick building with a quiet dignity that matched the gravity of the day. Sarah Nguyen met me in the lobby, her calm confidence steadying my nerves. "Ready?" she asked, shaking my hand. "As I'll ever be," I said, taking a deep breath. We entered the courtroom and took our seats, waiting for Trisha. When she arrived, accompanied by a dour older attorney in a pinstripe suit, I was struck by how diminished she looked. The poised, commanding woman who'd stormed my lawn was gone, replaced by someone whose designer dress couldn't hide her defeat. She avoided my gaze, staring straight ahead as she sat. The judge, a white man in his 60s with a no-nonsense demeanor, reviewed the evidence. My security footage, police reports, witness statements from officers Carter and Bennett, Clara's testimony, and Lily's video. When Trisha's turn came, she tried to paint herself as a victim, claiming she'd only wanted to foster community and that her comments to Ethan were misconstrued. Her attorney argued a restraining order was excessive, insisting it would disrupt Willow Grove's harmony. Sarah countered with precision, detailing Trisha's pattern of harassment, the racial undertones of her actions, and her lack of remorse. "Mr. Reynolds has the right to live without fear of retaliation," she concluded. "Ms. Wentworth's actions show she won't respect that right without legal intervention." The judge took only minutes to decide. "Ms. Wentworth," he said, his voice firm, "property rights are sacrosanct, regardless of who holds them. Your behavior trespassing, false accusations, and inciting vandalism shows a troubling disregard for Mr. Reynolds' rights and a willingness to escalate conflicts. The racial implications of your actions, whether intentional or not, are particularly concerning." Trisha's face burned with embarrassment, but she stayed silent. "The restraining order is granted," the judge continued. "For 1 year, you are to maintain a distance of 100 feet from Mr. Reynolds and his property, with no communication, direct or indirect. Violation will result in arrest. Do you understand?" "Yes, Your Honor," Trisha mumbled, her voice barely audible. "Court adjourned," the judge said, banging his gavel. Sarah leaned over. "That went as well as we could have hoped. Judge Carter doesn't tolerate nonsense." I nodded, relief washing over me. "Thank you, Sarah." As we gathered our things, I spotted Lily Harper waiting outside the courtroom, her pink hair now streaked with green. She stood as we approached. "Mr. Reynolds, I hope it's okay that I came. I wanted to see how it turned out." "Not at all," I said. "The restraining order was granted. Thanks for your help." She smiled, visibly relieved. "Good. After everything, it was the least I could do." As I walked out of the Wake County Courthouse with Sarah Nguyen, my attorney, the weight of the past few days began to lift. The restraining order against Patricia Wentworth was in place, ensuring she couldn't come within 100 feet of me or my home at 512 Maple Lane for a year. The judge's stern words to Trisha echoed in my mind. Her actions, laced with racial undertones and a blatant disregard for my property rights, had consequences. For the first time since that chaotic Saturday, I felt a sense of closure. But the journey wasn't over. Willow Grove, and my place in it, had changed forever. Lily Harper, the young caterer whose video evidence had turned the tide, joined us outside the courtroom. Her pink and green hair caught the sunlight, and her smile was warm. "I'm glad it worked out, Mr. Reynolds," she said. "You didn't deserve any of this." "Thank you, Lily," I replied. "Your courage made a difference. Not everyone would have come forward." She shrugged immodestly. "It was the right thing. My uncle always says integrity means standing up, even when it's messy." Sarah shook Lily's hand. "You're a credit to your family, Miss Harper. Marcus, I'll follow up with the paperwork. If Trisha violates the order, call me immediately." I nodded, grateful for Sarah's sharp advocacy. As she headed to her car, I walked with Lily toward the parking lot, curious about the neighborhood's reaction. "How's Willow Grove been since all this?" I asked. "Different," Lily said thoughtfully. "Trisha's barely shown her face. People are talking, questioning the way things have always been done. You know, the unspoken rules about who belongs here. It's like you shook things up." I hadn't set out to be a catalyst, but her words resonated. Willow Grove, with its manicured lawns and old-money gatekeepers, had long operated on assumptions that went unchallenged. My refusal to bow to Trisha's demands had exposed those cracks. "I just wanted to mow my lawn in peace," I said with a wry smile. Lily laughed. "Well, you did more than that. My uncle says your stand might be the best thing to happen to this place in years. It's making people rethink where they draw the line." Her words stayed with me as I drove home. The late May sun cast long shadows across Maple Lane, and my magnolias stood proud, their blooms a quiet testament to the life I'd built. When I pulled into my driveway, I saw Mrs. Clara Thompson tending her garden next door. She set down her trowel and waved, crossing to my property line. "How'd it go?" she asked, her directness as refreshing as ever. "Restraining order granted," I said. "1 year, 100 feet minimum." Clara nodded, satisfied. "Good. That woman needed a wake-up call." She studied me, her eyes kind but piercing. "You know, when you moved in, a few neighbors asked if I was worried about having a young black man next door." The admission wasn't surprising, but it stung. "What did you tell them?" I said I was thrilled to have a quiet professional who keeps his yard better than most of them. She replied, her smile crinkling her eyes. "Told them they could learn a thing or two from you." I chuckled, warmed by her support. "Thank you, Clara. Your help through this meant a lot." "Call me Clara," she said gently. "After facing down Trisha together, we've earned first names. And remember, Marcus, standing firm in your dignity is the strongest thing you can do, no matter who tries to push you down." Her words echoed my mother's advice, and I felt a renewed sense of belonging. "I'll remember that," I said. As Clara returned to her garden, I went inside, the quiet of my home a stark contrast to the chaos of the weekend. I poured a glass of iced tea and sat on my porch, watching the neighborhood settle into its evening rhythm. Kids biked down the street, and a couple jogged past, waving. For the first time in days, I felt like I could breathe. In the weeks that followed, Willow Grove transformed in ways I hadn't expected. Trisha Wentworth, once the self-appointed queen of the neighborhood, became a pariah. Ethan Caldwell's confession, backed by Lily's video, sealed her fate. The district attorney pressed charges for solicitation of property damage, filing a false police report, and inducing panic. While the hate crime enhancement was dropped due to a lack of direct evidence, the other charges carried weight. Trisha's court date was set for late summer, and whispers among neighbors suggested she was considering selling her daughter's house and moving away. Her social empire had collapsed, and the community she'd claimed to represent had turned its back. Ethan, the young server manipulated by Trisha, received probation and community service. His remorse was evident in his statement, where he admitted he'd acted out of misplaced loyalty, swayed by Trisha's tales of victimhood. I didn't hold it against him. Youth and bad influences could lead anyone astray. I hoped he'd learn from it. I had my walkway cleaned, the word outsider erased as if it had never been there. The restraining order hearing had been the final step in reclaiming my peace, but its impact rippled outward. Neighbors who'd stayed silent during the ordeal began reaching out. Mr. and Mrs. Larson, an older couple down the street, invited me for coffee, apologizing for not stepping in sooner. They admitted they'd been intimidated by Trisha's influence, a sentiment echoed by others. The Willow Grove Gazette, under pressure from readers, issued a retraction for Leonard Hayes' biased editorial, and he quietly stepped down as editor. Clara became a regular visitor, often bringing homemade lemonade or stories from her years as a librarian. She shared how Willow Grove had changed since the 1970s, when she and her husband were among the first black families to move in. "We faced our share of Trishas," she said one evening, sitting on my porch. "But you handled her with grace. I'm not sure I'd have mustered." "I just wanted to protect what's mine," I said. "This house, this life, it's what I worked for." "And you did," she said. "You reminded folks that fairness isn't negotiable, no matter who you are." Lily Harper stopped by occasionally, too. updating me on her uncle's reaction to the case. Lieutenant Harper, it turned out, was furious at Tricia for name-dropping him. He's making sure the precinct knows she's no VIP, Lily said with a grin. You've got his respect, by the way. He said you're the kind of neighbor he'd want. The neighborhood's unspoken rules began to shift. The annual Willow Grove picnic, once a showcase for Tricia's clique, became more inclusive, with new faces and voices shaping the conversation. I volunteered to help organize it, a small step toward building the community Tricia had claimed to champion but never truly understood. The event was a success, with Clara's pecan pie stealing the show and kids from every corner of the neighborhood playing together on the community green. My sister Lena and her husband Jamal visited often, relieved the ordeal was over, but proud of how I'd handled it. You didn't just win, Lena said one Sunday over brunch. You changed the game. People are talking about you like you're some kind of hero. I'm no hero, I said, laughing. Just a guy who wanted to mow his lawn. Maybe, Jamal said, but you showed what standing up can do. That's not nothing. As summer turned to fall, I found myself reflecting on the deeper lessons of that weekend. Tricia's actions, her entitlement, her coded racism, her willingness to manipulate were rooted in a belief that her status gave her power over others. But power like that is fragile, built on lies and fear. My refusal to bend, backed by the truth and the support of people like Clara and Lily, had exposed its weakness. I'd learned that dignity isn't just about holding your ground. It's about trusting that justice, however delayed, will find its way. One crisp October evening, I sat on my porch with a book, the same one I'd been trying to finish that fateful Saturday. The street was quiet, the magnolias shedding their last blooms. Clara waved from her garden, and a new neighbor, a young couple who'd just moved in, stopped by to introduce themselves. They'd heard about the Tricia saga, as it was now called, and wanted to meet the man who'd stood up to her. You've got a beautiful home, the wife said, admiring my lawn. We're hoping to fit in here. You will, I said. Just be yourself. That's enough. As they walked away, I felt a profound sense of peace. Willow Grove wasn't perfect, and neither was I. But it was home, and I belonged here not because I'd fought Tricia and won, but because I'd earned my place, just like everyone else. The sun set behind the trees, casting a golden glow over Maple Lane, and I knew that whatever challenges lay ahead, I was ready to face them with the same resolve that had carried me through. This story isn't just about a neighborhood dispute, it's about standing up to injustice, confronting entitlement, and the ripple effects of one person's courage. What do you think about the role of violence, like the vandalism in this story, in addressing perceived wrongs? Was Ethan's act a misguided cry for justice or an unacceptable escalation? How do you navigate unfair treatment in your own life, whether it's in your community, workplace, or beyond? Share your perspective in the comments below. I'd love to hear where you stand and what this story means to you. Let's keep the conversation going.